In Nigeria, recent available data indicate that our debt trajectory has reached a critical point, showing that, like many African countries, we continue to borrow internally and externally to fund capital and sometimes non-capital projects. This highlights the urgent need for a stronger oversight, transparent borrowing practices, and a collective resolve to ensure that tangible economic and social returns match every naira borrowed. Across Africa, debt levels have reached alarming proportions. By 2022, the continent's total public debt had reached $1.8 trillion, with external debts alone surpassing $1 trillion by 2023. Several countries are now in dangerous debt to GDP territory. In many cases, governments are spending more on servicing debt than on healthcare and other essential services, shrinking the fiscal space available for development. The continental picture makes clear that Africa faces not just a budgetary concern, but a structural crisis that demands urgent parliamentary attention and coordinated reform. The countries of the West Africa sub-region carry the same burden. Distinguished participants, when we examine the sources of Africa's external financing, it becomes clear that the weight of debt on our continent is shaped by who we borrow from and on what terms. Today, Western private lenders hold about 35% of Africa's government debt through banks, asset managers, and oil traders. Multilateral institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF account for another 39%, while bilateral loans from other governments comprise 13%. Chinese creditors, despite much of the public debate, hold only 12%. To place this in sharper focus, in 2019, bondholders alone represented 27% of Africa's external debt, making them the single largest creditor group ahead of China at 13%. The implications of this structure are far-reaching. A significant share of our national revenues is tied to debt servicing, rather than being invested in the things our people need: roads, schools, hospitals, and innovation. The high cost of commercial loans, coupled with the burden of repayment in foreign currencies, leaves many African economies vulnerable to market shocks. This narrows fiscal space, constrains domestic policy choices, and slows the pace of sustainable development. If Africa is to grow stronger, we must not only negotiate fairer terms of borrowing, but also rethink our dependence on external finance. We must channel more energy into mobilizing domestic resources, fostering intra-African trade, and creating financial instruments that serve the continent's own development partners. Only then can we move from vulnerability to resilience and from dependency to true economic sovereignty. It is also important to stress that effective oversight of public debt requires vigilance, knowledge, and institutional strength. As already noted, debt levels in Africa are rising at a pace that compels us to act with foresight. By empowering our public accounts and finance committees, we create institutions that can stand as guardians of fiscal discipline and protect our economies from the risks of reckless borrowing. This conference provides us with an opportunity to reflect, share experiences, and develop new strategies for debt governance that are both responsible and sustainable. Furthermore, the imperative or the subject matter lies in its cross-border nature. No country in our region can claim immunity from the consequences of debt management. Unsustainable debt in one country can affect the stability of others, weaken regional trade, and undermine collective development. It is therefore our shared responsibility to use WAPAC as a platform for solidarity, peer learning, and collective action. The resolutions of this assembly will not only shape national policies, but will also reinforce the accountability architecture of the sub-region. The 10th House of Representatives is firmly committed to transparency and accountability in public finances. We recognize that in Africa, where development challenges remain acute, fiscal responsibility becomes indispensable. This is why the House has taken deliberate steps to strengthen parliamentary oversight mechanisms, improve reporting standards, and ensure that public funds are managed with integrity. In doing so, we reaffirm our conviction that transparency is the cornerstone of good governance and the key to rebuilding public trust. In line with this commitment, I am pleased to announce Nigeria's readiness to champion the establishment of the West African Parliamentary Debt Oversight Framework under WAPAC. This framework will harmonize debt reporting across our countries, create regional standards for transparency, and empower our parliaments with timely data for effective scrutiny of borrowing practices. It is my conviction that this framework will strengthen our bargaining power in international finance and protect the long-term interests of our citizens. Beyond frameworks, we must invest in people. Nigeria, working with WAPAC and development partners, will support the establishment of a capacity-building program for public accounts and finance committees across the region. This program will equip members and staff with modern tools for debt sustainability analysis, fiscal risk assessment, and oversight of complex financial instruments. Our approach to oversight must also be inclusive. In addition to the excellent work the Public Accounts Committee is doing right now, the House will further introduce policies that will guarantee greater citizen participation in debt governance as part of our open parliament policy, which has been sustained since 2023. Our major borrowing proposals will be subject to public hearings, and simplified debt reports must be made available to the general public. Oversight is most effective when it is not only parliamentary, but also people-driven. Citizens have the right to know, and we have the duty to inform them. At the same time, we must ensure that debt oversight is anchored on sustainable development. Borrowing should support infrastructure, health, education, and industries that create jobs and reduce poverty. Reckless debt that fuels consumption or corruption must be exposed and rejected. As representatives of the people, we must never forget that our oversight role is not about figures alone, but about the lives and futures behind those figures. I wish to once again commend the chairman and members of the House Committee on Public Accounts for their vision, as well as development partners and our stakeholders present here for their commitment to fiscal responsibility. Your support and presence testify to the shared resolve to build stronger parliaments and better societies. As we begin this 5-day conference, I urge all participants to devote themselves fully to the deliberations. let us work with dedication for the resolutions that will emerge from this gathering hold the potential to strengthen effective public finance management and accountability across our continent and our dear country, Nigeria.